All right, let's start building some actual routes for our app. We have a good plan in place, and we can start implementing these based on what we know. And again, the way we're going to test these is using Postman. We don't need to worry about the front end now. We want to build our server to be working properly, and only at the end, once everything is working, we can plug it into the front end. And we can also let the front end team know, hey, these are the endpoints that we expect. And this is what we will respond with. All right, so I think it's time to get started. The very first thing we want to tackle is the sign-in. So let's think about this. I'm going to do app.post for sign-in. And when we do the sign-in route, we're going to have a request response. And here, just to test that everything's working, we'll do response.send sign in. Let's save. Go to Postman, do localhost, click send. I always like doing incremental steps to make sure that everything is working and getting those small wins every time as we're working. So I have it saying this is working. Well, that's because we did a GET request to the root instead of doing sign in and then a post. And we have cannot post sign in because apparently I can't spell. There you go. A bit of misspelling on my part. There you go. Signing. Perfect. Now I want to show you something that we're going to use moving forward. Up until now, we've done send, which can also send JSON. But Express comes with a built-in JSON method on response that we can use. And it has a bit of added features when responding with JSON, and we want to focus on using that. So from now on, I'm going to be using this. And there's a slight difference in what we receive. We receive a JSON string this way. All right, so let's think about sign in. We're not going to necessarily just say sign in and that's it. We want to check whatever the user enters on the front end. It's going to come back here in the response or in the request, and we want to check it with our current list of users to make sure that their passwords match. So it sounds like we need some sort of a database. But for now, because we haven't learned about them yet, we're going to create a variable. And this variable is going to be called database. And it will have users. And this users property will be an array of objects. And this array of objects will have ID 1, 2, 3. We'll have name John. We'll have email as john@gmail.com. We'll also have password. We'll say cookies. We will have entries, which is what we're going to use to track scores. So entries means how many times John has submitted photos for face detection. And then finally, we probably also want to keep track of when John joined our app. We can do that by doing new date, which comes with JavaScript. It will just create a date when this part gets executed. And you'll see later on how this is going to get displayed. All right, and let's create another user because we are in an array after all. And this user will be called, well, we'll have an ID of 1, 2, 4. It'll be Sally, Sally@gmail.com, and her password will be bananas. Perfect. Now, looking at this for sign in, we're going to get a request. And within this request, we're going to have, remember with sign in, we want to make sure that we use post. So we're going to have access to request.body. And it sounds like a conditional statement, doesn't it? If we do an if statement and we say request.body, well, what we're going to have on the body. Before we do this, let's go back to Postman and think about what we're going to send. When we do sign in, we're going to do a post request. In the body, remember, we're going to be sending JSON because we aren't using an HTML form. We're going to hit raw and then JSON, application JSON. And now that we have JSON here, we have this box where we can enter what we want to send with our body. Again, it'll do validation for us, and we'll say that as the sign-in form on our front end had, we have email, which will be, let's say we'll have john@gmail.com. So we can imagine that John is entering our website and using the sign-in route, the sign-in form, and his password will be cookies. We're going to send this information from the front end. Again, we're just pretending that John is logging in so that we have access to it here. So let's add that if statement. If request.body.email equals whatever we have in the database. So let's say database.users, and we'll just grab John's. Although we should be looping through this for now, we just want to make sure that it works. We'll grab John and we'll check against the email entry in the database. And request.body.password equals whatever we have in the database. If that works and that is true, then we'll respond with a JSON that says success. Otherwise, we can say we'll respond with a response status 400, and we'll say error logging in. All right, let's give this a go. I'm going to save, come back here, sign in. Let's click send. And I get a bit of an error. Read property email of undefined. This is a little tricky. Why isn't it reading the email property? And I want to show you this error because it happens a lot and it's something that people forget all the time. Remember, when we're sending data from the front end and it's using JSON, well, we need to parse it because Express doesn't know what we just sent over. In order to be able to use request.body, well, we need to use body parser, don't we? So let's do that. I'm going to import body parser and require it. And if you don't have this in your project, then you'll have to npm install it. But in all Express apps, you're going to see this. So it is one of those packages that you should never forget and pretty much every Express app comes with. In order to use this, if you remember from our previous lesson, we just do app.use because it's a middleware, and we'll do bodyparser.json. And we should do this after the app variable has been created. All right, let's save that and try that again. I'm going to click send, and we get success. Look at that. If I change this to now just say cookie, click send, I get a 400 bad request with error logging in. Let's make this a little bit bigger so you can see. How awesome is that? We got our sign-in working nicely. All right, that's pretty nice. We could do a for loop here, for each maybe, to check in case Sally registers, but that is a bit of a hassle, isn't it? Imagine if we had hundreds of users and we used a for loop in the sign-in to check against all the users and all the passwords. And this is exactly why one of the reasons that we use databases is, well, databases are really, really good at grabbing and checking against different inputs versus a variable or an array here where we have to loop through everything. So for now, because this is working, let's keep it the way it is. Let's do the next one, register. If you remember, register will be a post request. And again, we'll get a request response. This request response register means a new user is going to be created. So we're not going to be doing any checks like this because the user doesn't exist. We want to grab the request.body and enter the new information into our database. In this case, we have a database object that has users and an array. So we can do database.users.push to add to this array. Let's do that. I always love starting off with what the request is going to look like. So going back here, we see that when we create a new user, if you remember the registration form, we get name, email, and password. Let's go to Postman and create those. I'm going to say post register. And here we get email, password, and also name. And we'll say that the name is Anne, her password is apples, and email will be ann@gmail.com. And we're going to be sending that through JSON. Oh, and see how it gives me an error? That's because I get a comma. Again, Postman is just awesome for this. Going back, we want to create a user like this. So let's just copy this, what we have here, and say that we want to create a new user by saying database.users.push to add to the users array. And within here, we'll add an object, which is what we just copied. But we don't want to add John again to the users, do we? No, we want to grab whatever we get from request.body. In our case, using destructuring, we can just say email, name, password from request.body. And now, on the database, we can just, for now, just statically add the ID of 125. Name will be the name that we get. Email will be email, again, that we get. And then finally, password will be what we receive. And entries will be 0 because, well, Anne will be a new user and she will start off with 0 entries. And joined will be new date because it will generate, whenever this is run, it will generate the timestamp of that day and time. Let's save this and see if this works. I go back here, click send. Oh, I get a loading and it's just spinning. I'm going to click cancel request. And you know why that is? Well, because we haven't sent a response. Express now is just hanging in there because we haven't returned anything. We haven't responded. So always remember to do that. In our case, we'll say that response.json will be the user, the new user that was created. Perhaps if they're registering, we want to grab that info and display it in the profile page. In our case, we'll say that we want to grab database.users and we want to grab the last user, which we just created. And that's simple to do. We just do database.users.length, which is the length of the array, -1. Again, it grabs the last array or last item in the array. Let's save here and go back, click send. All right, look at that. We have Anne with 0 entries, a new timestamp for when she registered, and now we have a new user. Let's go back to the root route here, and let's just return for now the database.users to make sure that we see what users we have. I'm going to save here, go back, and just do a GET request on the root route. If I click send, oh, I made a bit of an error here. I can't spell. Let's try that again. If I go back, click send. All right, I got John and Sally, but where's Anne? Let's go back to our request again, and Postman gives you the history of your requests, so you don't have to keep writing them. You can go back to register, look at the body, and let's send Anne again. All right, we've registered. Now if we go back to our GET request and click send, all right, Anne's there. We got 3 new users. But what just happened? Well, this is another good case for why we need a database. The reason that Anne wasn't added the first time around is because I changed the root route to include database.users, which means the NodeMon had to restart. The server had to restart and start over. And because these are JavaScript variables, every time we restart the server, this gets run all over again. So the database initiates with just the 2 users. Again, we don't really use variables to store information that we need to what we call persist, that is, to last and be memorized by the system. Databases are really, really good because they run on disk somewhere out there in the world, and they're really, really good at keeping this information and not going down. Or if they do go down, that they have backups, so that users always get added and we don't lose any information. We'll get to databases and we'll actually implement this with a database. But I want to show you right now the pain points of not having databases. We had to loop, or we would have to loop through these users if we had to check sign in, or we had to always keep in mind that whenever the server restarts, we lose all of our data. All right. Well, things are looking good. There's definitely a few things that we can improve on here, but we just want to build the skeleton. We have 2 more endpoints left, and we're going to tackle those in the next video. I'll see you in that one. Bye-bye.